Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's complimentary webinar from ICMI. Do the holidays stress out your contact center? Sponsored by WhitePages PRO. I'm Christina Hammerberg, Associate Editor and Community Manager for ICMI, and I'm your host today. Before we begin, let's do a little console housekeeping. First, I'll ask that you take a moment to disable your pop-up blockers if they're on. You'll notice that there are several icons at the bottom of the console window. The first one allows you to see the presentation slides, so you'll want to make sure that that one stays maximized. Next is the Q&A icon. We will be hosting a live Q&A session at the end of this webinar, and you can participate by asking questions at any time during the presentation. All you have to do is type your question into that window and click Submit. If you are experiencing any technical problems during the presentation, you can click the question mark icon to access the Event Help Guide. Clicking the other icons in the console will let you access our speaker bios, direct you to learn more about our sponsor, WhitePages PRO, or find out about our other upcoming ICMI webinars. You can also download a copy of today's presentation in PDF format to follow along. You can also share this event with your colleagues through your Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter accounts right here from the webinar console. We've already set up the Twitter button with the ICMI webinar hashtag, so if you click there, you can follow along with the conversations around today's events and then log in to tweet or post in real time. So let me introduce you to our speakers. Today we are very pleased to welcome Jeff Toister, President and Founder of Toister Performance Solutions, and Craig Paris, Chief Revenue Officer for WhitePages PRO. Thank you both very much for joining us today. Okay, so before I hand the mic over to Jeff, I want to encourage all of you in the audience to be social. We've got all of our Twitter accounts up here on the screen, so please feel free to add us at any time during the next hour. And with that, I will hand the mic over to Jeff. Are you ready, Jeff?
I think so.
Awesome. So let me just advance to your first slide, and you are ready to go.
Okay, well, thanks, Christina, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Given the topic, I imagine you might be combating some of your own stress just tuning into a webinar when you have other things going on. So I appreciate it. And, of course, our goal is to give you something useful to take away to help combat some of that stress that our agents face during this time of year. So to get us started, just a little bit about me. I'm a consultant. I work with companies to help them improve customer service and do a lot of work with call centers. That's a prior career was managing and training in call centers, so that's become very important to me. Training is something that is a lot of what I do. I like working with employees to help them find ways to improve performance. And I'm also an author, a book called Service Failure. And so I'm going to be sharing with you today a little bit of information that's coming from my own experiences, but also from my book that was just released a few weeks ago. So there's a cover shot. So if you want to check that out, you can learn a little bit more about hidden obstacles that get in the way. So our goal today really, from my perspective, is to give you 3 strategies that you can use right away to help you provide faster service. And we know faster service increases customer satisfaction. When our customers are happier, it helps our agents feel a little bit less stress. I think one of the ways to describe the feeling this time of year, especially if you experience a lot of seasonal call volume, it's stress, sometimes even panic. If you're looking up at your call volume, you see how many calls are in queue or how much wait time you have. That can be very stressful, and especially if those of you had some experience being on the front lines, as I know I have. That's a tough time of year. And so if we can make things a little bit easier and find some quick fixes, I think this will be a productive session. I'll also share something with you, though, that I think it's hard to evaluate ourselves. In other words, you've made a good step by being on the webinar today, tuning in, trying to learn something new. But I recently toured a call center with a client, and my client remarked, despite hold times of up to an hour and a clear kind of panic and stress amongst the call center agents, she said, you know, we're well aware of what all our challenges are, and we've done everything that's in our power to fix it. And as I looked around, I spotted maybe 5 different things that they could do right away to make things better. And it occurred to me, just like you see this pumpkin trying to carve itself, that when we're looking at ourselves, it's sometimes hard to evaluate. We need an additional perspective. So I encourage you, as I share a few strategies with you today, think about, try to think of, remove yourself from that stress that maybe you're feeling as well, and try to consider these strategies with an open mind. Some of them might be a little counterintuitive. And see if there's an opportunity to take just one away to implement it. And you never know, if you're going to get some good results, then again, this is a pretty good use of your time. So let's get started then. And the very first strategy I want to share with you is knowledge sharing. I think knowledge sharing in call centers is not a new concept, not a new topic, but there's ways that we can do it more efficiently and more effectively. So I want to give you 3 examples of some inefficiency caused by our reps not having the right knowledge at the right time, and then I'll share some solutions, some very easy solutions with you. So the first gap, the first skill gap, if you will, is a difference in skills amongst your agents. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with skill-based routing. Some of you may do this. So you route calls to people with a certain set of skills, but even within those groups, the skills are different. For example, I was working with one client. They were in tech support. And if the call happened to get to one agent, a common problem, she could fix that in about 5 minutes. But if it got to another agent, same skill group, same hunt group, luck of the draw, this agent would take about 30 minutes to resolve the same problem. And so that's one example of inefficiency. If there's a knowledge or skill gap that's that wide within your team, then depending on who the call is routed to, it can be a huge difference in how much time it takes. Let me give you another example. We'll talk about some solutions in a moment. So the next one is what I call triage. This time of year, if our call volumes are high, we need some extra people, what do? We might bring in some temporary employees and give them about a third of the training they would normally get. We might get some people from other departments that don't normally answer the phones to get on the phone with us. And of course the challenge there is the call might get routed to the first person who's kind of doing triage duty. I called a company the other day, and somebody was working, I think, from maybe their marketing team or some other department, and didn't really have the knowledge and skills to help me out. So guess what happens? I got a call again, or actually in this case, he had to have a colleague give me a call. So maybe our handle time is still looking good because the first call was pretty short. But the overall, it took 2 calls for me to resolve this, which of course adds to call volume. I'll give you one more example. I call this drowning information. So if we do provide updates, we do provide knowledge to our reps, but we're overloading them. So maybe they're spending too much time on a call searching for that latest update. What's the latest news on this product or this software release? Or maybe they have yesterday's bulletin but not today, so they give out the wrong info, which again can drive up call volumes, can decrease customer satisfaction, can make things take a lot longer. And so with all of these types of knowledge gaps, I want to share with you a few strategies that you can employ very quickly at little to no cost. Let me give you some quick fixes. First is pretty straightforward. If you distribute updates on a regular basis, distribute them in one bulletin. In other words, if I look at how reps and call centers are interacting with the latest and greatest information, it might come via a flurry of emails. It might come via instant message. It might come as a paper handout to people. There might be scrolling updates on display boards. There might be all kinds of information. But our goal is to give people the right information at the right time. So if you can simplify things and give just one daily bulletin or twice daily bulletin with all the most important information, maybe even links to other things, that's an easy way to make it easier for your reps to have the right knowledge. Give you another one is just simplifying your updates. Sometimes we want our reps to have so much information that we give them too much for them to really make sense of. So if you can stick to just the top few highlights, it's easier for your reps to find information that's timely and useful. I'll give you another one. Designate an expert. One of the things I think that worked when I looked at this call center, we had one person that took 5 minutes, another person took 30 minutes, is that 5-minute person's an expert. And while they may be very, very valuable on the phone, if I were to pull this person off the phone and actually have them support the rest of the team in terms of providing knowledge, or maybe this is somebody, if they got stuck, they could put a customer on hold, go directly to this person and ask a question, then having that one person as kind of a focal point makes it easier for people to get the answers they need and get them quickly. So that's another strategy that might work for you. A couple more. If you do have display boards that are capable of this in your call centers, go ahead and put the latest, most important updates on those display boards so that if something is timely, if it's pertinent, and it can help your reps resolve an issue faster, they can see it right in front of them. And finally, the last one, something I think is counterintuitive when we're really busy. When we're really busy and stress levels are high, we stop having regular communication. However, this is probably the most important time to have regular communication, so I suggest having daily huddles. And if you're not familiar with that, there's a lot of names for it, a huddle. Sometimes we call them a stand-up because we don't even have time to sit down. It's about a 5-minute meeting, or even bring your own chair. But it's a very short meeting with the supervisor and anybody coming on shift at that time to talk about what are the highlights of the day, any kind of challenges, and any kind of information that we need to know. And this is a great type of situation where you can share the latest updates, you can share information about a problem that someone discovered, but also the fixes that can go with it. And so that quick communication, that no more than 5-minute meeting, is a great way to keep everybody on the same page. Okay, so those are some strategies you can use to bridge that knowledge gap and hopefully have people have the right knowledge at the right time so they can answer your customers' questions a little bit more quickly. I'm going to move on to the second strategy now. And the second strategy is what I call the 5 questions technique, or otherwise known as the art of proactive rapport. And I'll share with you first the challenge and then how you can use this particular technique. So the challenge is what I call the dreaded dead air. And this happens on many calls. We're waiting for our computer system to catch up with us. We're waiting for some sort of background process to happen. And if your rep isn't particularly good at initiating conversation, doing something about that dead air could be a wasted opportunity. And there's 2 reasons that, of course, this dead air can be a problem. One is customers' perception of time is often based on how engaged they are. So dead air tends to drive down the customer's perception of the overall experience because they feel maybe it's a little awkward or perhaps it takes too long. There's also missed opportunities. So if our reps aren't good at making conversation, or if their conversation's awkward, for example, I'm based in San Diego, and people will ask me sometimes very awkwardly, so how's the weather there? And of course, do you know the answer? The answer is it's nice. No more conversation. So if we had a better question or 2 to ask, we might capitalize on an opportunity. But if we don't, what might happen is more calls in the future. In other words, we resolve one problem today, but we miss an opportunity to resolve a second problem on the same call. And in the future, the very near future, we're going to get more calls from that same customer. So what can we do about this? What's an easy technique you can give your reps to bridge this? Well, the technique is called the 5-question technique, and it's a very simple strategy. What you do is you have each of your reps write down 5 questions that will help them create a little bit of rapport, so that increases customer perception of how well the service interaction went, and also uncover perhaps additional needs to serve. And by writing down 5 questions ahead of time, chances are in almost any situation, one of those questions will be appropriate or useful. And so I'll give you just a couple of very simple examples. If you are in tech support, a great question is everything else working? We solved this problem today. Is everything else working? I have a client that does this, and what's amazing is it extends the call time, but it reduces additional follow-up calls, and it also increases customer satisfaction. And it's also a more targeted question than, is there anything else I can help you with today? What's interesting about that is there anything else I can help you with today, is that we hear it so often as customers, we tune it out. So you have to come up with a question that's perhaps a little bit different or a little bit unusual to capture your customer's attention here. All right, let me give you another one. This time of year, if we're dealing with product sales, for example, you might ask, is this a gift? And if you ask that near the front of the call, this can help prompt your rep to provide other options such as gift wrap, gift receipts, shipping to alternative addresses. There's all sorts of other things that might come up if we know it's a gift. We might also inquire about additional sales then if we know it's a gift versus something for themselves. And finally, another one, just geographic. If you work in a call center, you talk to people all over the country, you get to know a little bit about each part of the country. And an easy way to build rapport is to ask something. For example, another client of mine, about a month ago, they took a moment to ask any customer of theirs from the New York, New Jersey areas, how were you affected by Hurricane Sandy? And, you know, the moment it's counterintuitive because if someone gives you an answer, this might increase your call time just a little bit. But it did two things for them that I think were very positive. One is it created a very strong connection, a very strong rapport. It made them feel more human to that customer, which of course increases customer satisfaction. But the second thing is it also uncovered additional needs. And so in this case, this was a company that was business to business. They were working with business owners. Some business owners were talking about some of their challenges with lost revenue, et cetera, and they were able to provide additional suggestions and additional solutions that in the long run retain customers and probably reduced follow-up calls as well. So overall call volume went down, even though that particular call may have gone up in length just a little bit by asking that question. But again, the important thing is to have these questions prepared and ready ahead of time so that your reps are able to use maybe one or two of them to establish some rapport, fill that dead air, and find additional ways to serve. And so this 5-question technique is a very simple exercise. It only takes you about 5 minutes to help your reps work through this. Okay, so that's the second strategy. Third strategy I want to share with you is to reduce multitasking. Now, if you look at call center jobs, I mean, that's multitasking we know is a requirement. So I have to be careful what I mean by this. What I really mean is multitasking that involves several assignments at once. So we know it's very common if you're on the phones, but you might have some dead time between phone calls. Maybe we assign some additional work like responding to emails or doing some other background work. We also know that in today's call center, a lot of our reps are going to have an instant messaging window up so they can communicate with their colleagues. They have other windows up. Maybe they have a window that visually notifies them in some way every time they get an email. And all of these things kind of grab their brain's attention. And when that happens, it actually slows down their ability to resolve the challenges for the customer they're talking to on the phone. And it also causes them sometimes to miss opportunities completely. So I want to see if we can do a demonstration of how multitasking affects your brain. And then I'll give you a real example of how multitasking can lead to a service failure. And finally, I'll give you a couple of solutions for overcoming this. Okay, so here's the demonstration. It starts easy and gets a little bit more difficult. What I'm going to ask you to do when I say go is simply read aloud the names of the colors that you see on the screen. And let's do this together. All right, ready? Go. Red, blue, orange, green, black, purple. Okay, so I bet for everybody this was pretty easy. Now, because there's just a slight delay from when I advance the slide until you see it on your screen, I'm going to put up a new slide, and we're going to have colors listed again. And as soon as you see it, I want you to read the names of the colors out loud. The only difference this time is that the colors are going to be typed in different color ink versus just black. So once again, once you see this new slide, simply read the names of the colors out loud. Okay, I bet that wasn't too difficult for you either, but maybe some of you noticed a little bit of something going on there. Now, one last challenge for you. I'm going to put up one more slide. It's going to look very similar to this one. Now this time, instead of reading the names of the colors, I want you to say out loud the color that the word is written in. For example, if we were to use this slide, instead of green, you would say purple because green is written in purple. So you're going to identify the color, not the word, and say that out loud instead. Now again, because we have a slight delay, I'll ask you to start on your own as soon as you see the next slide come up. Here it comes. Okay, now what I imagine many of you experienced was a much more noticeable delay. You were probably still able to do it correctly, but at a much slower pace. And that's what happens to our brain when we ask it to concentrate on more than one thing at a time. Our brains are physically capable of really only processing one conscious thought. So what happens is it has to kind of alternate rapidly between several conscious thoughts, or everything slows down just a little bit. And when we work slower, of course, that takes longer to resolve problems for our customers. It also means missed opportunities. So let me give you a real example of a service failure that was directly attributed to multitasking, and then again I'll share with you an example of how we can overcome that. So the example is something I do for fun. I play on a recreational level indoor soccer team. It's in a men's over 30 league, and we play on Thursdays. And when our season ends, the new one begins typically the very next week, and our schedule for the team is typically posted on the league's website by Sunday. Well, one Sunday I noticed that my team's schedule had not been posted, so I sent an email to the office. And here's the email that I sent to them. I'll give you just a moment to read that. Okay, pretty straightforward. I imagine this is a pretty simple request that anyone handling this email can process. But let me share with you the response I received. So this was it. By the way, I didn't edit out all the salutations and good afternoon and how are you, Jeff, and this is so-and-so responding. Nope, they just cut and paste a schedule into the body of the email and sent it off. But if you look carefully, look at when this email was sent. They did respond very quickly within minutes of my email. If you look at the date, Sunday, June 3rd, now look at the dates of the schedule. You may notice a little bit of a problem. They weren't actually answering my question. Now, sometimes we can blame the customer. Customers aren't always precisely clear. I didn't say specifically the schedule for my next season. I just assumed that that would be the only schedule they could think of. So there was a small misunderstanding. So I was still at my computer. I sent this email. We've clarified it now, right? We've cleared up any miscommunication. Here's the email that I received in response. Okay, still not very helpful, right? Haven't answered my question. And so I think if we look at this from afar, it's easy for us to say, wow, this person really blew it. They weren't being very helpful at all. But now I want to share with you what was probably happening, because on Sundays there are plenty of soccer games going on at this facility, and I know that the person responding to this email was most likely multitasking. So they were answering phone calls, they were sending emails, and they probably had people coming up to them to ask them questions on a regular basis. So these are all different tasks that they were doing. And when we have a lot of tasks, so now think back to your call centers, if we have a lot of tasks, we tend to kind of rush through things, move a little faster. I've talked to plenty of people, experienced it myself. If I see that display board and it says we have 50 calls in queue and the average wait time is 30 minutes and our service level is at 20%, I might even panic a little bit. I really might start working a bit faster to get through this. And when that happens, of course, I miss opportunities. I'm not as focused. I don't concentrate. And so that's exactly what happened here with this email, is the person was trying to multitask. They didn't concentrate. And instead of solving my issue in one email, it actually ended up taking 3 to find out that it would be another week before they were going to write the schedule for the upcoming season, that I actually had a week off from league play. So this is the byproduct of multitasking, is that we actually take longer to do things even though we're busier. So it's a counterintuitive measure to say slow down, focus on one thing at a time. You'll actually work faster. So what can we do? How can we reduce this multitasking? What are some things that you can do immediately to make it easier for your reps to work more efficiently, more effectively, and not lose out on these opportunities to serve? Here's a few suggestions. One is to focus your reps on one task at a time. So whether it's answering incoming phones, emails, follow-up work, etc., help them focus on just one thing. The second thing is pretty straightforward as well, is give them the tools or the awareness to block out these distractions. In other words, once people are aware, they realize I can tune out some of these distractions if I consciously focus on them. If I make it a priority to focus on my customers and not on my colleague who's trying to get my attention or wrapping up this last email, etc. And then the last thing that you can do is change assignments to match volume and add variety. Now, if I'm going to focus someone on one task at a time, say, okay, you're on phones right now or you're on emails, what I can do is if the phone volume goes up, I can easily move people from email onto phones. And then as the volume goes back down, which we know in many of our call centers, it kind of goes up and down throughout the day, I can move more people from phones back to emails. So what it does is it still focuses them on one task at a time, but we have people who are able to meet demand where demand exists. The other thing that's interesting is a byproduct of focus is sometimes if we focus too much, we get into kind of autopilot mode, and again, we're just trying to get through things versus really concentrating. So by adding a little bit of variety to our reps' day, we make it a little bit easier for them to focus on each individual customer. And again, we reduce the opportunities for service failure because they're multitasking. Okay, so we've covered 3 strategies today. And I think you can use any of these immediately to provide faster service, increase customer satisfaction, reduce stress levels, and you can put these into use right away. And my hope for you is that you take at least one of them and try it out, even on a limited basis. It's really amazing if you do a little bit of a test with something, even something that seems a little counterintuitive, how well some of these can work. For example, I worked with a client where they, like many of us, thought it would be more efficient to have people take phone calls and then work on emails in between those calls. And when I got them to try separating the two and focusing people on emails and focusing people on calls, they noticed that everything went faster and errors also went down. But it took them committing to do that test, to do that trial, to see if it was actually going to work. So with that, with the spirit of trying something new, I'm going to give you one more technique, one more thing just to think about. I didn't put this in my slides because I know not everybody's going to be on board with this. So I'm just suggest think about it and try it. One other place where you may be able to reduce stress levels and get better performance are those display boards in your call center. And I think almost every call center has them, right? It's the board that says, here's how many calls we have in queue, here's the average wait time perhaps, our service level, basic information about that. And when I ask call center managers why they have that, they often say, well, I want my reps to know when times are busy so they work a little faster, and I want to know when times are slow so they know they can do some of their follow-up work. And if you think about that, there's some other byproducts of that display board. One of the byproducts is when your reps see big bad numbers on those display boards, their stress levels go up, and they do in fact work faster, which means they might miss opportunities to serve, and by working faster it tends to generate more calls. So it's an area where that can be almost damaging. It can increase stress levels and you can reduce performance. But the flip side is interesting too. I've talked to a lot of call center reps about that. And what they've often said is, when I get through a big push and we have this huge spike and it's all hands on deck and we get through the spike and now the call volume goes down, it's almost like a sigh of relief. I start working a little slower. They don't say it that way, but essentially I draw out from them that they're consciously working slower, taking too much time because they feel they have it. Instead of using that time to get through a backlog of wrap-up work or emails or update your CRM or whatever it is they can be doing with that time, essentially they're recovering from stress. They're doing as little as possible. So my additional bonus suggestion to you, if you're willing to try it, is use those display boards to display product information, messages of encouragement or motivation, but use the call volume data just for your supervisors, your planners, your schedulers, and don't display it during these times of stress, because we really want our reps to focus on one customer at a time and do the very best they can with each customer, and of course be as efficient as they can with each customer. So that's just an additional technique or additional strategy, I should say, that you may want to consider. All right, so I hope you got something out of it today. I want to remind all of you to be social. So we've got everybody's Twitter addresses here. And if you do use that back channel, so hashtag ICMI webinar, I know you can submit questions via the webinar directly, and we'll have a chance to respond to those today. But also anything you send that might be related to what I shared with you today via Twitter, I'll be happy to respond there as well. So now I think it's time to turn things over to Craig Paris at WhitePages PRO.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. That was really insightful. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Craig Paris, again, from WhitePages. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here. I've been with the company 7 years now and counting. So I'm going to start out and just give a company overview, highlights for some of you that might not be familiar with us, but I'm assuming many of you have used our consumer site. So we're the largest and most trusted online directory. We have some very well-known premium brands in the market, WhitePages.com being our core, 411 as well, and some of the other names you see here. So in aggregate, we're a top 40 web property. We see huge volume. We have 40 million monthly unique users coming to the site to access the contact information on our site. And like many folks today, we're ramping up aggressively around mobile, and we've about 25 million downloads to date, both from an iPhone and an Android perspective. Some of the clients that we work with throughout the company you can see here below, and we definitely hope to add some of you guys there over the next couple of months. So moving forward, WhitePages PRO, we looked at So looking at the marketplace and being aggressively attentive to our consumer site weblogs, we started noticing that a lot of large merchants, both from a call center and a fraud perspective, were accessing our consumer sites on a regular basis, very often, huge volume. So in speaking with many of these folks, we realized we had a much bigger opportunity to work with them where they'd have access to much richer and deeper data, both, again, to ID users from a call center perspective, help with customer service, and then on the fraud side to help raise potential flags if someone's looking to do something fraudulent. And clearly with e-commerce growing, that's a growing area as well. So here are some of the clients we work with on the pro side. The group has been, the division's been around for about 1.5 years now, and it's definitely the fastest growing team within the company. We're really excited about what we put in place and what we're doing. So moving forward, I'd like to talk with you about our VIZIO case study. So VIZIO, as many of you are aware, they're one of the largest LCD and HD TV electronic companies. And when we met with them and just doing a lot of qualification and learning about their needs, we identified together a major opportunity to reduce call duration and improve customer satisfaction, which at the end of the day is their #1 goal. So in discussion with these guys, and you know, VIZIO already, they're clearly, a well-equipped organization, a champion of efficiency, but they realized that they could, when calls came in, they could help reduce time and increase customer satisfaction and rep satisfaction as well. So really the solution there, working with WhitePages PRO, is that they were able to add our phone number intelligence to the process when someone calls in. And what they were able to do is to identify unknown phone numbers from both new and current customers, and also import contact information with just a few clicks. So it's much more simple. And the entire process with VIZIO, these guys were great. Love having a case study with them and being able to talk about it in the marketplace. It really took just 2 days to integrate with our API and to give them access. So rolling up, really, what does that mean for everyone? We were able to reduce call time about 31 seconds on the VIZIO side. We're definitely seeing that we together increase customer satisfaction because, as we all know, and I know this from being a consumer, when I call in and these guys get about a million calls a year inbound, everybody wants to get to the root cause. They want to discuss with the customer service rep the problem they're having. So the caller is able to be ID'd much more rapidly. In many cases, and I think some of the points that Jeff had, this is helpful around customer service and more personalization. You're able to say, Mr. Jones, Mr. Paris, how are you? And so that's cut down call time, increased customer satisfaction. And another thing that we heard within the case study process is that VIZIO is very firm in letting us know that the main reason that they wanted to work with us is that they got really great reviews and feedback from their reps internally. And based on what a lot of what Jeff was covering, clearly we want to keep our top employees happy, and if our reps happy, that could only help. So in summary, the VIZIO case study has been great. Really happy about the performance there, and we've helped them cut down 31 seconds in call time. They have access to our large database, and we're happy to answer any questions for you today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. Okay, so now we have reached the Q&A portion of our webinar. At this time, I will encourage everyone to continue asking questions, and so we can answer them in real time here on the webinar. So to get us started, I do have a question for Jeff. So, and it's basically around the point that you made about the 5 key questions and how they apply to temporary or seasonal workers, because this time of year in particular, and around the holiday time, a lot of contact centers have these workers that are, not typically in the center, that might have been brought in just to help out around the holidays. So how can they be applied, or how can those tips be applied for those particular contact center employees?
Well, Christina, I think that's a terrific question for seasonal and temporary people. And I'd even add, I just call it the all hands on deck folks, or the triage people. In other words, the people we've kind of we've roped in for other departments and said, we need you to answer the phone. I know not all call centers are like that, but in some cases that's where it happens. And I think this technique is probably most applicable to those folks. If you have really veteran reps, they probably don't need the 5-question technique. They know the questions to ask. But as we also know that our temporary workers or seasonal workers, they probably don't get as much training, or at least they don't have as much experience as some of the other folks. So this works because it's a very simple activity, and you help them come up with these 5 questions based on the experience of the trainer, based on the experience of the supervisor, based on their own insight. And the next thing that happens, though, is they use these questions to generate confidence. One of the challenges we see is with new employees is they haven't yet developed the confidence that they need to really communicate effectively with their customers. And when we don't have confidence, that adds to our stress levels. It also decreases our performance. That's just kind of a natural instinct. So by giving them a very simple technique like the 5 questions, you increase their confidence in developing rapport with their customers. Now, the interesting thing about confidence is confidence tends to translate directly to credibility. And what we don't want is our customer on the phone to realize, oh boy, I got routed to the wrong person. I got routed to someone who doesn't know what they're doing. We want that customer's experience to be seamless, whether the call gets routed to the person who's spending their second day on the phones, or someone who's been a 3-year veteran who's quite the expert. And so we can use those questions to generate confidence. That enhances credibility, makes everybody feel a little bit better about the interaction. So I think it's the perfect application for that group.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. So, Craig, I have a question for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what WhitePages PRO does, their service, and what kind of impact you have on average handle time?
Sure. Great question. So from an overall business perspective, like I said earlier, I'm happy to flush it out. We're really focused on 2 key areas right now. One, working with call centers to cut down average handling time, where in this case with VIZIO, we've shown 31 seconds. So there's a lot of different things that that number helps to achieve, right, from an ROI perspective, from a customer service perspective. And then on the other side of the business, we're very focused on merchants, right? We've seen the access to our richer data through Pro versus the WhitePages consumer site has been very helpful with some of the brands you see there in accessing whether someone, for example, is looking to ship a 60-inch plasma to a PO box. We can help flag that, our data. If someone's potentially looking to ship something to a vacant home, which is clearly another red flag potentially. If someone's using a prepaid mobile card, a non-fixed VoIP like a Google Voice or a Skype, just richer, deeper data that helps provide more information to decide if someone's potentially looking to commit fraud. So those are the 2 key cases, and our goal over the next year as we're growing the team is to continue to provide and aggregate and build richer data through all the different sources that WhitePages has, the WhitePages core sites, our mobile apps, and of course any user-generated content that our users provide us with. So hopefully that answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, it absolutely does. Thank you so much, Craig. So we just got a question in for Jeff from Jude Charles. Jeff, how strong would you suggest a call center staff to be divided into 2 groups of reps? One group handling emails and the second group handling calls.
Okay, so I imagine it's how strong. In other words, how much would I advocate doing that? I suppose.
Yes, that seems to be what he's asking. So.
Okay, so in a really small call center, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do that. But anytime you get a little bit of size, I think this is an essential way to go. I've even done this. I once ran a call center with about 14 seats, so that's almost as small as you can get, and we still employed this technique, and it worked very, very well. So I think the quick answer is very strongly, but it doesn't mean that you can't move people around. So I don't know if it's necessary, if it's 2 evenly weighted teams, it might be everybody's capable of doing both, or you have a certain core group of people that are cross-trained. But what you do is you allocate people to the assignments that have the most needs. In other words, if we have a high call volume, then I'm going to allocate more people to answering the phones. If I have low call volume but high email volume, I'm going to allocate more people to email. The key is to be able to focus on one task at a time, because the example I showed you is a great example. I've got many, many more where the biggest part that suffers really is email. Email volume goes way up because people aren't really taking the time to pay attention. When that next call comes in, it never comes in right when I've sent that email. It comes in the middle of the email. And if you observe reps, what they do is they try to cheat a little bit and finish typing while they're supposed to be greeting that customer on the phone. Or they might be on the phone with the customer, and they're still in the back of their mind, they're thinking about that email. So I think it's an essential way to both avoid errors and increase efficiency is if you can move people to one task or another. I just don't know it necessarily needs to be 2 discrete teams. You might have cross-trained or universal agents that you can allocate based on where the work is. So I hope that answers the question, but if not, please provide some more information.
Thank you, Jeff, because I know that's something that, I was wondering about. I mean, the scalability here, because, if you're in a really, really small contact center, there are fewer agents dealing with all channels. So, how those strategies apply when you only have a small staff working with you. So I know that's a concern.
I would say for a small call center, one of the things that you could do, I did some research that I do every year, and I asked the question, how quickly do we expect as consumers a response to email? So we're still not, and I didn't bring this up, but we're not talking about responses to, say, social media channels like Twitter and other places. We do expect immediate responses there, so we should probably put those into the mix as well. But if we're talking about email, what's interesting, the results consistently show that if we email a business, we still expect a response within one business day, and that's a pretty large majority of people. An interesting aside, we actually expect our coworkers to respond much, much faster. But for businesses, it's still one business day, and you have probably 80 to 90% of your consumers, at least half a day to a whole day is their range where they expect a response. So in other words, they don't need a response that instant, especially if you have a small call center. If you have an autoresponder where when a consumer or a business emails you and the response immediately comes back and says, thank you, we've received your email, and we will respond within, let's say, one business day. Then as long as that's acceptable to the customer, if you respond within that time frame, then you're okay. So working backwards, how does this apply to a small call center? Well, it's easier to say, save my emails towards the end of the day. Most call centers that are small, they tend to have very discrete spikes, whether it's mornings or Mondays and Tuesdays. And so if you know where that call volume is going to come in, you can focus your people on the call volume and then gradually save those emails for maybe later in the day, reallocate your staff to those emails and knock them out, and your customer's still going to be very happy. So in that sense, I think it's still very scalable for smaller centers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff. Okay, so Craig, I have another question for you and for WhitePages. So what kind of impact, you discussed the impact that you have on average handle time, but what about average time to answer?
Great. So, depending on call script, we've generally seen about a 30-second reduction in call time. I also have John Neely on the phone. I think it'd be great for him to jump in because he handles a lot of our accounts within this vertical. John, you want to chime in?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Craig. Hey, I'm happy to answer that one. So the way our system works and the whole flow of handling a call, when the call first comes in, you're able to identify who's calling, and that's really when you start to process the call. And the first step is to check to see if inside your CRM you already have a record available for the customer. And if you do, then you don't even have to make a call. Everything's fine. If you don't, you can call our API. You're going to get a response back in way under a second. So it really doesn't have any impact whatsoever on average time to answer. You can just quickly flows through. And the nice thing about it is when the rep answers the phone and the screen pop is there, you have all the relevant contact information for the customer right up in front. And as Craig mentioned earlier, it's really nice to have the rep say, hello, Mr. Paris, as opposed to who's calling, please, and how can I help you? Did that answer the question? Would you like some more information on that?
Well, I think it did. Craig, do you think that sufficiently answers?
Yeah, I think John did a good job. Smart guy. But if we have any other questions around that, we're happy to answer them. But I think he did, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much. So we are rounding out the top of the hour right now, and we have no more questions in our queue at the moment. That doesn't mean that you can't continue to ask questions. So up on our screen right now, we have contact information for Jeff and Craig. So you can feel free to reach out to them directly if you have any other questions or thoughts on their presentations. And you can always contact ICMI and find out more about our other resources and upcoming webinars as well. So that concludes our presentation today. I would encourage you, I'm going to put up a slide now with a link to our feedback forum. We do encourage you to fill this feedback form out so that we know how we did today and we can better improve our webinars for you in the future. And this concludes our program for today, so thank you again for joining us. Shortly following today's live webcast, you'll be able to access this presentation on demand. And this webcast is copyright 2012 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyright, if that is the case, by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. So on behalf of ICMI and our sponsor, WhitePages PRO, we thank you all for attending, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.